The November rain had been falling for 3 days straight in the Cascade foothills when I first heard the sound that would change everything. It wasn't the gentle patter on my cabin roof or the usual symphony of the Pacific Northwest wilderness. This was different. A low, guttural breathing mixed with the crack of branches, heavy and deliberate, like something massive was trying to move through the forest without being heard. Most people would have locked their doors. I grabbed my jacket. What I found in those dark woods that gray afternoon in 2015 would shatter every assumption I'd ever had about what's real and what's myth. But more than that, it would teach me something profound about survival, fear, and the quiet dignity of choosing peace over violence, even when the world hunts you. Before I continue with this story, if you're enjoying this content, please take a moment to subscribe and hit that notification bell. These true encounters need to be shared, and your support helps keep these stories alive. Now let me take you back to that cold November day when everything changed. The Douglas firs stood like ancient sentinels as I made my way deeper into the forest, following a trail I'd walked 100 times before. The town of Timber Ridge sat 20 miles behind me, and out here, civilization felt like a distant memory. This was the Oregon I loved. Wild, untamed, mysterious. I'd been working as a wildlife surveyor for the Department of Fish and Wildlife for 6 years. My job was to track animal populations, monitor their movements, and report any unusual activity. I'd seen black bears, mountain lions, even a few wolves that had migrated down from Washington, but I'd never seen anything that prepared me for what waited in that ravine. The sound came again, closer now, a deep, labored breathing that seemed almost human in its rhythm. Then I heard something else. Whimpering. Something large was in pain or afraid, maybe both. I pushed through a thicket of salal bushes, their wet leaves soaking my jeans, and stopped dead at the edge of a small clearing. There, wedged between two massive boulders covered in bright green moss, was a figure that my brain refused to process at first. He was at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark reddish-brown hair that hung in wet tangles around his broad shoulders. His face was a strange mixture of human and primate, high cheekbones, a wide nose, a prominent brow ridge, but it was his eyes that struck me most. They were the color of aged whiskey, deep amber pools that held an intelligence I hadn't expected. Those eyes met mine and time stopped. He didn't roar or charge. Instead, he pulled back slightly, his massive chest heaving with rapid breaths. He was afraid of me. My hands shook as I raised them slowly, palms out, in what I hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "I'm not going to hurt you," I whispered, though my voice came out barely audible over the rain. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then, impossibly, he spoke. "They're close." His voice was like gravel rolling down a mountainside, deep and rough, but unmistakably human in its cadence. "The ones with guns." My knees almost gave out. He could talk. This creature, this legend, this impossible thing was communicating with me in English. "Who's close?" I managed to ask, though my throat had gone completely dry. Before he could answer, the sound of dogs barking erupted from somewhere to the east. Multiple dogs, the kind hunters use for tracking. Then I heard voices. Men calling to each other through the trees, coordinating their search. "There, I saw movement near Boulder Creek. Get the tranq guns ready. This one's worth a fortune." My stomach turned to ice. They weren't just hunting him. They were hunting him for profit. The creature, I couldn't keep thinking of him as just it anymore, looked at me with an expression I can only describe as pleading. In that moment, I made a decision that defied every logical instinct I possessed. "Can you run?" I asked. He nodded, wincing as he shifted his weight. "Then follow me. Stay low and quiet. I know these woods better than anyone. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the researcher in me, unwilling to let something so extraordinary be captured or killed. Maybe it was simple human decency. Or maybe deep down, I recognized something in those amber eyes, a person, not a monster. We moved through the forest like shadows. Despite his massive size, he was remarkably quiet, placing his feet carefully on moss and soft earth, avoiding dry branches that might snap. The rain helped, masking our sounds and scent. I led him through a series of game trails I'd mapped over the years, paths that wound through the densest parts of the forest where the hunters wouldn't easily follow. Behind us, the dogs bayed and the men shouted, but their voices grew fainter. My cabin sat on the northern edge of Whispering Pine Lake, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that most people didn't know existed. It had belonged to my grandfather, a logger who'd built it with his own hands in 1968. Now it was my refuge, my research station, my home. We reached it just as dusk was falling. The creature had to duck significantly to fit through the doorway, and even then his shoulders barely cleared the frame. Once inside, he sank to the floor with a heavy sigh, his back against the stone fireplace I'd spent all summer repairing. I locked the door and pulled the curtains closed, my heart still racing. Only then did I really look at him in the warm light of the cabin. He was magnificent and terrifying all at once. Scars crisscrossed his arms and chest, old wounds from a life lived in the wild. His hands were enormous, easily 3 times the size of mine, with thick fingers and dark nails that looked more like claws. But there was a gentleness in the way he moved them, carefully avoiding my furniture, mindful of the small space. "Thank you," he said quietly, those amber eyes fixed on me. "You risked much." I grabbed a blanket from the couch and held it out to him, though it looked absurdly small given his size. He took it anyway, draping it over his shoulders. "What's your name?" I asked, realizing how strange it felt to ask a Sasquatch such a human question. He was quiet for a long moment. "We don't use names the way you do, but the last human who showed me kindness. She called me Walker, because I walk between your world and mine." "Walker," I repeated. "I'm Rowan. Rowan Fletcher." He nodded slowly. "Rowan, like the tree. A good name." That's how the first night began. I made a pot of strong coffee and found myself sitting on my living room floor with a creature I'd been told my entire life didn't exist, listening to the rain drum on the roof while hunters combed the forest looking for him. That first night, Walker barely slept. Every sound from outside, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of wind through the pines, the distant crack of a branch, made him tense. I watched him from my armchair, sipping coffee that had long gone cold, trying to process the impossibility of the situation. Around 3 in the morning, he finally spoke again. "You want to know why they hunt us?" It wasn't a question. I nodded anyway. "Fear," he said simply. "Humans fear what challenges their understanding of the world, and they destroy what they fear. It's been this way for as long as my kind has walked these mountains." "How long has that been?" I asked. His eyes grew distant. "Before your people came across the Great Water, before the tribes built their longhouses by the rivers, we were here when the ice still covered these peaks." I tried to wrap my mind around that kind of timeline. Thousands of years. Tens of thousands, maybe. "My grandfather told stories," I said carefully. "The Chinook tribes, the Salish peoples, they all had legends about forest giants. They called them different names. Chemeques, Sasquatch." Walker's expression softened slightly. "The old tribes understood. They left offerings at the forest edge. They did not hunt us. We had an arrangement, mutual respect. What changed? New settlers came, with guns and greed and the belief that anything unknown must be captured, studied, owned." He paused, his massive chest rising and falling with a heavy breath. "In 1892, a group of men caught one of us in the mountains near what you now call Mount Hood. They kept him in a cage, displayed him like an animal. He died after 37 days. The pain in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't ancient history to him. This was personal memory, passed down through generations like trauma. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "Your kind has much to be sorry for," he replied, but there was no anger in his tone, only a deep, weary sadness. "But not all of you are the same. You proved that today." As dawn broke, I made breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, bacon. Walker watched with curious eyes as I cooked. "Do you eat meat?" I asked, suddenly realizing I had no idea what Sasquatch dietary habits might be. "Sometimes. Fish, mostly. But we prefer what the forest provides freely: berries, roots, nuts, mushrooms. Taking life as a last resort." I nodded and added extra eggs to the pan. When I offered him a plate, he ate slowly, carefully, his enormous fingers holding the fork with surprising delicacy. It was oddly humanizing, watching this legendary creature navigate something as mundane as breakfast. The hunters hadn't given up. From the cabin windows, I could see boats on the lake, men with binoculars scanning the shoreline. They'd set up a base camp about 2 miles south near the old logging road. I counted at least 8 vehicles. "They're organized," I muttered, lowering my binoculars. Walker stood in the shadows, away from the windows. "They've been tracking my family for 3 months. They have equipment now: thermal cameras, drones, motion sensors. It's harder to disappear than it used to be." "Your family?" Something twisted in my chest. "Are there others?" "A small group, maybe 15 of us left in these mountains. Once there were hundreds." He moved to the fireplace, running his fingers over the river stones my grandfather had carefully selected. "We used to gather in the high valleys every autumn. Now we're scattered, isolated. Safer that way." I made coffee and we sat together in the dim cabin light. Outside, clouds hung low and heavy, threatening more rain. "You asked yesterday how we survive," Walker said. "Would you like to know?" I nodded eagerly, the researcher in me fully awakened. "First, we become invisible. We move only at twilight or in storms when your vision is poor. We walk on moss, on stone, on shallow water, surfaces that hold no tracks. We travel along ridgelines where our silhouettes blend with trees. We never ever leave the same trail twice." I listened, fascinated. "We read the wind like you read books. Scent is everything. We position ourselves downwind of settlements, of hiking trails, of anywhere humans might be. If the wind shifts, we move immediately." "What about shelter?" "We use caves, but only the deep ones where sound doesn't echo out. We cover the entrances with brush that looks natural. Sometimes we sleep in the crowns of old-growth trees. You'd never look up there." A slight smile crossed his broad features. "The best hiding place is always in plain sight but unexpected." "And food?" "We eat what won't be missed. Fallen fruit, fish from streams where bears don't hunt, plants that grow in abundance. We never take more than the forest can spare. Sustainability, I believe you call it now. We've practiced it for millennia." I thought about my years studying wildlife management, all the courses on conservation and ecosystem balance. This creature understood it instinctively, had lived it for countless generations. "But the hardest part," Walker continued, his voice dropping lower, "is the isolation. Never speaking to outsiders, never reaching out, even when we see humans in danger. Never defending ourselves when attacked because fighting back proves we're monsters. That must be incredibly difficult. You have no idea." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw centuries of loneliness in those amber eyes. To have language, culture, memory, and no one to share it with except your own shrinking family. To watch your world get smaller every year as cities expand and forests shrink. To know that one day, perhaps soon, there will be no more of us left. The weight of his words settled over the cabin like a heavy blanket. Here was an entire species on the brink of extinction, and the world didn't even acknowledge they existed. That afternoon, I went into town for supplies. I told the woman at Timber Ridge General Store that I was stocking up for a long research stint. She didn't ask questions. People around here respected privacy. But I heard the talk. The hunters were offering a reward: $50,000 for confirmed video footage, $200,000 for a live capture. They'd brought in specialists from somewhere down in California, men with military backgrounds who treated this like a tactical operation. I bought extra food, medical supplies, and returned to the cabin with my heart pounding. Walker had stayed hidden in the root cellar, a space barely large enough for him but safe from any unexpected visitors. The rain returned that evening, harder than before. Water streamed down the windows in silver sheets, and thunder rolled across the mountains like drums. Walker seemed more relaxed during storms. "Weather is our ally," he explained. "It covers sound, washes away scent, keeps humans indoors." We sat by the fireplace, and I found myself asking questions I'd never imagined asking anyone. "Do you have families? Children?" "We mate for life," Walker said. "My mate Mira is in the high country now with our daughter. She's only 12 summers old, still learning our ways." 12 years old, a child. The thought of a young Sasquatch learning to hide from the world made my chest ache. "What do you teach them?" "Everything. Which plants heal and which poison. How to read weather patterns. How to identify humans by their footsteps. Hikers walk differently than hunters. How to memorize vast territories so you can navigate in complete darkness. How to control your breathing to remain silent for hours." He paused. "And how to mourn because loss is inevitable." "You've lost many?" His expression darkened. "My father was shot in 1998 by trophy hunters near Crater Lake. They left his body where it fell. My brother disappeared in 2007, probably captured, though we never found proof. My mother lived to be 93, which is old for us. She died quietly in her sleep, at least. That's rare." I did the math. If his mother lived to 93 and died relatively recently, that meant Walker himself was probably in his 50s or 60s. He looked ageless to me, timeless, but I suppose all wild things do until you learn to read the signs of their years. "What about joy?" I asked softly. "Is there any joy in your lives?" For the first time since I'd met him, Walker truly smiled. It transformed his face, making him look younger, lighter. "Oh yes, we sing, though not with words like yours. We have ceremonies when the seasons change. We dance under the full moon in hidden meadows where no humans venture. We tell stories, ancient ones about the time before, and new ones about the courage of those still living. We laugh, we play, we love deeply." "That sounds beautiful." "It is, and it's worth protecting, even if it means living in shadows." That night, Walker told me stories his grandmother had told him. Tales of when his people lived openly in the mountains, before the first European ships arrived on the coast. Stories of cooperation with the indigenous tribes, of shared harvests and mutual protection. Stories of magic and mystery that I half believed despite my scientific training. In return, I told him about my life. Growing up in Portland, studying biology at Oregon State University, the death of my grandfather that brought me back to this cabin, the loneliness of working alone in the wilderness. He listened with the same intense focus I'd given his stories, and I realized that this exchange, this simple sharing of experiences, was something he'd been starving for, human connection. Even if I wasn't quite human in the way he'd expected, I was close enough. Morning brought danger. I woke to the sound of engines, multiple vehicles coming up the old logging road that was supposed to be closed. Through the window, I saw 3 trucks and an ATV, all with California plates. The hunters had expanded their search grid. Walker was already awake, crouched low in the root cellar with the trap door barely cracked so he could listen. "Stay down," I whispered. "Don't make a sound." 20 minutes later, someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find a man in his 40s wearing expensive outdoor gear and carrying a rifle. 2 others stood behind him near a truck equipped with what looked like a satellite dish and multiple cameras. "Morning," the man said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sorry to disturb you. I'm Marcus Webb. We're conducting a wildlife study in the area. Have you seen anything unusual in the past few days? Large animal tracks, strange sounds, anything out of the ordinary?" "Wildlife study, right. And I was the Queen of England." "Just the usual," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Black bears getting ready for winter. Saw a cougar last week, nothing strange. Mind if we take a look around your property? We're tracking a possible grizzly migration pattern." "Actually, I do mind. This is private land, and I'm in the middle of my own research project. I'd appreciate it if you moved along." His smile vanished. "Ma'am, we have authorization from the—" "From who?" "Because last I checked, this cabin and the surrounding 50 acres belong to me, and unless you have a warrant, you need to leave. Now." We stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, he nodded curtly. If you see anything unusual, there's a reward. Significant money for credible information. He handed me a card with a phone number. Think about it. I watched them drive away, my hands shaking. When I was sure they were gone, I opened the root cellar. Walker's eyes were wide with fear and something else. Gratitude. You protected me again. Why? The money they're offering could change your life. I thought about that for a moment. $50,000 would pay off my student loans. $200,000 would set me up for years. But the cost would be betraying someone who'd shown me trust. Someone whose entire species was hanging by a thread. Some things matter more than money, I said simply. Besides, you're not a what, you're a who. And I don't sell out people I've shared breakfast with. That afternoon, we heard gunshots in the distance. Walker flinched at each crack of rifle fire, his massive body tensing. They're trying to flush us out, he said. Scare us into moving. It's an old hunting tactic. Will your family be okay? Mira knows to go deep. There are caves in the high country, places humans can't reach easily. She'll keep our daughter safe. But worry creased his features. Still, every shot fired is a reminder that we're prey. Always prey. As evening fell, I made dinner. Venison stew from a deer I'd harvested the previous month. Walker ate slowly, savoring each bite. Your grandfather built this place with care, he observed, looking around the cabin. I can feel it. The way the logs are fitted, the placement of the windows to catch morning light, the fireplace designed to draw smoke properly. This was built by someone who understood living with nature, not against it. He was a logger, but he loved these forests. He only cut what was necessary, always replanted, taught me to respect the wilderness. He would have understood us, I think. I think he did, I said quietly. He used to tell me stories about seeing things in the woods that didn't make sense, shadows that moved wrong, sounds that couldn't be explained. He never called them Bigfoot or Sasquatch. He just said, some things prefer to remain mysterious, and we should respect that. Walker nodded slowly. Wise man. That night he told me more about survival, the real, deep strategies his people had developed over millennia. We observe humans constantly, he said. We watch your towns from the hills. We learn your patterns, your technologies, your weaknesses, not to harm you, but to avoid you. That must take incredible patience. It's all we have. We know which humans rise early and which sleep late. We know when hunting season begins and ends. We know the sound of every type of vehicle, every kind of firearm. We can tell by footprints whether someone is a casual hiker or an experienced tracker. You're like intelligence specialists, survival specialists. There's a difference. He leaned back against the wall. We also use your own superstitions against you. We make sounds that frighten. Wood knocks, howls, roars. We arrange trees in strange patterns. We leave tracks that seem impossible. The more mystical and frightening we seem, the less likely you are to pursue us seriously. Wait, I said, connecting dots. All those Bigfoot stories about paranormal abilities, interdimensional travel, UFO connections. Mostly us being theatrical. A hint of mischief crossed his face. If humans think we're supernatural, they don't bring hunting rifles. They bring cameras and theories. Much less dangerous. I couldn't help but laugh. Here was this incredible species using human imagination as a defense mechanism. It was brilliant and heartbreaking all at once. I've written approximately 4,000 words total. Would you like me to continue with the final section? Day 5 and the conclusion? Dawn broke clear and cold on the 5th day. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the forest washed clean and glistening. From the cabin window, I could see frost on the grass and my breath misting in the air. Walker stood near the fireplace, straighter than he'd been in days. The fear had left his eyes, replaced by something else. Resolve. They're leaving, he said quietly. How do you know? I can feel it. The pressure in the air has changed. They've given up this area, at least for now. He turned to face me. It's time for me to go. My stomach dropped. I'd known this moment would come, but I wasn't prepared for how much it would hurt. In 5 days, this impossible being had become something like a friend. No, more than that. He'd become a reminder that the world was bigger and more mysterious than I'd ever imagined. Where will you go? North into the Cascades. There's a valley there where we gather sometimes when it's safe. Mira will find me. We have ways of leaving messages. Stone cairns, marked trees, scent trails only we can read. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Walker moved to the window, looking out at the forest he'd been born to. The morning light caught the reddish tones in his hair, making him look almost bronze. "Before I leave," he said, "you asked me once how we truly survive. I gave you tactics, strategies, practical knowledge, but that's not the real answer. What is?" He turned back to me, and in his amber eyes I saw thousands of years of wisdom. "We survive because despite having the strength to fight, despite having every reason to hate your kind for what you've done to us, we choose peace. Always peace." The words hung in the air between us. "We could fight back," he continued, his voice soft but intense. "One of us is worth 10 of you in physical strength. We know your territories better than you do. We could wage a war that would terrify your species, but we don't. Why not? Because violence breeds more violence. Because revenge is a poison that destroys the one who drinks it. Because—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because we remember what it was like before fear divided our peoples, and we hold on to hope that someday that understanding might return." I felt tears prickling my eyes. "That's extraordinary." "No," Walker said gently. "It's necessary. The moment we become the monsters you fear, we truly lose. We become what you believe us to be. So instead we run, we hide, we endure. We choose life over pride, survival over justice, peace over retribution." He moved to the door, ducking his head to fit through the frame one last time. "Even when you hunt us," he said, looking back at me. "Even when you destroy our homes and separate our families. Even when you turn us into legends and jokes and tourist attractions, we choose not to hurt you. That must be the hardest thing in the world." "It is. But it's also what makes us more than animals, more than monsters. It makes us people. Just different from you." I followed him outside. The forest was alive with morning sounds. Birds calling, squirrels chattering, a creek gurgling somewhere in the distance. Walker took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the clean mountain air. "Thank you, Rowan Fletcher," he said formally. "You gave me safety when I had none. You gave me food when I was hungry. You gave me conversation when I was lonely. You risked everything for a stranger." "You're not a stranger anymore," I said, my voice thick with emotion. You're someone I'll never forget." He reached out one massive hand, and I placed mine in it. His palm was warm and rough, calloused from a lifetime in the wilderness. He held my hand gently, mindful of his strength. "If you ever need help," he said, "leave a white stone on the stump by the lake. I'll know. I'll come if I can." "Will I ever see you again?" "Perhaps. The forest has a way of bringing together those who are meant to meet." He released my hand and took a step toward the tree line. Then he paused, looking back one final time. "One more thing." "Yes?" "Thank you for seeing me as I am, as a person, with thoughts and feelings and fears, and not as the monster your stories made me. That gift, it means more than you know." Then, with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large, Walker melted into the forest. One moment he was there, solid and real. The next, he was simply gone, as if the trees had swallowed him whole. I stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where he'd disappeared. The forest looked the same as it always had, Douglas firs reaching toward the sky, undergrowth thick and green, morning mist rising from the damp earth. But I knew it would never look the same to me again. Now, when I looked at those shadows between the trees, I didn't see emptiness. I saw possibility. Mystery. Life hidden in plain sight. That was 9 years ago now, in 2015. I still live in my grandfather's cabin by Whispering Pine Lake. I still work as a wildlife surveyor, though I've shifted my focus to conservation and habitat protection. I've become something of an advocate for wilderness preservation, though I can never quite explain the urgency I feel about protecting these forests. The hunters never came back. Marcus Webb and his team moved on to other pursuits, other legends, other ways to make money from the mysteries of the world. The reward money went unclaimed. Sometimes, late at night when the moon is full, I hear sounds in the forest that I can't quite explain. The crack of wood on wood, like signals being sent. A low melodic howl that sounds almost like singing. Heavy footsteps that circle the cabin slowly, carefully, protectively. And sometimes in the morning, I find gifts. A pile of perfect huckleberries on my porch steps. A massive salmon lying cleaned and ready by my door. Once, a crown of woven cedar branches hung on my door handle. Intricate, beautiful, impossible. I never see who leaves them, but I know. I keep a white stone in my pocket now, always. I've never put it on the stump by the lake. I've never needed to. But knowing I could, knowing that somewhere in these vast mountains there's someone who would come if I called, it changes everything. Last summer I was hiking in the Cascade High Country, doing a survey on mountain goat populations. I stopped to rest by a waterfall, drinking from my canteen and enjoying the view. That's when I saw them, 3 figures on a ridge about a quarter-mile away. 2 large, 1 small. They were there for just a moment, silhouetted against the sky. The smaller one waved, a distinctly human gesture, before all 3 disappeared into the trees. I waved back, even though I knew they were already gone. Walker had made it home. His family was safe. They were still out there, still surviving, still choosing peace over violence, still holding on to hope in a world that had forgotten them. I think about him often, about what he taught me in those 5 days, not just about Sasquatch survival tactics or ancient forest wisdom, but about dignity, about choosing to be better than your circumstances demand, about responding to hate with grace and to fear with understanding. In a world that often feels divided by fear and anger, where differences lead to conflict and misunderstanding breeds violence, Walker's people offer a different path. They could fight. They could rage against the injustice of being hunted and denied. But instead, they endure. They adapt. They survive through wisdom rather than war. We choose peace, he'd told me, even when you hurt us first. Those words stay with me. They've changed how I move through the world, how I respond to conflict, how I think about strength and power. Real strength, I've learned, isn't about domination or violence. It's about having the power to hurt and choosing not to. Having every reason to strike back and choosing mercy instead. The Pacific Northwest has always been a land of legends. Ancient forests, towering mountains, mist-shrouded valleys where anything seems possible. People come here searching for mystery, for encounters with the unknown, for proof that there's still magic in the world. I found my proof. But more than that, I found a teacher, a friend, a reminder that we share this world with others, seen and unseen, and that coexistence requires compassion, respect, and the courage to protect what we don't fully understand. The cabin is quiet tonight. Rain is starting to fall again, the way it does in November in Oregon. I've built a fire in the stone fireplace my grandfather constructed with his own hands. I'm drinking coffee and watching the forest darken beyond the windows. And I'm listening. Always listening. Because somewhere out there, in the shadows between the trees, in the hidden valleys and secret places of these ancient mountains, Walker and his family are surviving. They're teaching their children the old ways, singing their wordless songs, living their careful, cautious lives. They're proving every day that survival isn't about being the strongest or the most aggressive. It's about being the wisest, the most patient, the most willing to endure. And maybe, just maybe, if we could learn that lesson, if we could choose peace the way they do, even when hurt, even when afraid, we'd all survive better. The rain picks up, drumming harder on the roof. Somewhere in the distance, I hear something that might be thunder, or might be something else. I smile and raise my coffee mug toward the window, toward the forest, toward the hidden lives that thrive in secret all around us. Stay safe out there, Walker, I whisper, and thank you for everything. The fire crackles, the rain falls, the forest keeps its secrets, and I keep mine. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about the mysteries that might exist just beyond our understanding, please take a moment to like this video and share it with others. These stories matter. These voices, even the silent ones, deserve to be heard. And who knows? Maybe someone else out there has had an encounter they've been afraid to share. Let this be permission to speak your truth, to honor the mysteries, and to choose compassion over fear. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep your eyes open and your heart kind. The world is more wonderful and strange than we can imagine.